Scott, welcome to the show.
Hi, Dave. How's it going? It's so exciting to be here. This is the ultimate fun party.
Awesome. It's going to be. It's going to be right now. Here we go. So let's just, okay. So, viewers, listeners, this man right here has had quite the career in the world of comedy. He has rubbed elbows with giants. We're talking like Mount Rushmore types in the comedic industry, if I could call it that. So, what has that ride been like for you, Scott?
Well, I got to tell you, you have a really soft open. I mean, that was, hey, here's Scott. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Scott Edwards, the man that owned a chain of comedy clubs, flew in Lear jets, had a submarine, a crazy, crazy guy. Let's hear it for Scott. Whoa, yeah, it's crazy. Woo! Yeah, okay, that's enough of that. All right,
Nice. I love it.
your listeners probably don't care. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Dave. I had a chance early in life. I was 24. It was my third company. For those that are keeping score, I'm a lifelong entrepreneur. I've started over a dozen companies, but the third one was a comedy club that led to me owning a chain of comedy clubs. And this is back in the 80s. Yes, I have gray hair. And I got a chance to work with just some amazing people, Dana Carvey, Bob Saget, Robin Williams, Gary Shandling, Dana Carvey. I could go on and on. It's incredible, but it was really exciting and fun, which is what this podcast is all about.
Oh, exactly. So, okay, let's talk about that first comedy club. How did that come to pass? Like, how did you find this opportunity?
Well, as I said, I'm kind of an entrepreneur. I'd already started a small construction company. I had a portable disco outfit. We were doing disco
Really?
for weddings and parties back in the late 70s and early 80s. But I was in between jobs. I wasn't actually in between jobs. I was selling life insurance, and I was like 23 years old and hated it because when you're 23, you don't think you're ever going to die. But somehow I was selling life insurance. And my father, who had a great sense of humor, said, "Hey, there's this little club down by UCLA in Westwood, California, which is in Los Angeles, called the Comedy Store. You got to go by. You'd love it." And so I was traveling with my then girlfriend, soon to be wife, soon to be ex-wife, and we went by the Comedy Store. And Dave Coulier was there from Full House. A lot of people know him from Full House and America's Funniest Videos. And also Sandra Bernhardt, George Wallace. And I was just, it was like $5 to get in. I'm sitting in the audience laughing my butt off. And I go, man, this is such a great thing. And see, back then, people have to understand, Dave, stand-up comedy wasn't really out there. It wasn't an art form, that was sometimes seen on TV specials, or you could go to the Catskills and see some live shows. Maybe in Vegas, there'd be some comic opening up for Frank Sinatra or something. But stand-up comedy was never a showcased entertainment style. And I saw that in this little club in Westwood, and in the 6-hour drive home, the whole way, I just figured out what I needed to do to get my own club going. And I came up to Sacramento, that's my hometown, quit my job. I went bankrupt, so I had no debts or anything, no issues. Went back down to LA and started meeting other comics. Dave Coulier introduced me to Bob Saget, who was a huge, huge friend and helpful, who introduced me to Gary Shandling, Jerry Seinfeld. And these guys, I was always asking questions. I would talk to the club owners, the waitresses, the different comics. What do I need to know? And then I came back to Sacramento, and I was a pretty good negotiator, salesman. And I negotiated with a restaurant that had a banquet room that if they'd let me use the banquet room for free, they got the food and drink service, and I got the door. So every day they'd have a banquet. I'd have to go in, tear down the banquet, set up my comedy club.
Wow.
Then I would do the door, MC the show, and then have to tear down my comedy club. And then they would set up for another banquet the next day. And this went on for about a year and a half. The first 6 months, I was losing money right and left, even though I didn't really have any money. I was already gone bankrupt. But still, Sacramento was just in awe. Wow, what's this? What's this live entertainment? I'm having a great time. I'm laughing. I'm not thinking about my bills or my job or anything. This is great. And it took off. And I got to tell you, I won't say the right place at the right time. I just think that based on my entrepreneurial mind, when I saw an opportunity and a niche that wasn't being filled, at least here in Sacramento, to go for it. And a little trivia for you. When I opened Laughs Unlimited, that was the name of the club, Laughs Unlimited, all comedy showroom. It was the 12th full-time comedy club in the entire United States. That's how new stand-up comedy was.
So tell me this, Scott. You're like a 20-something, you're bleeding money left and right. What kept you going? Like you were saying, the comedy clubs were not big back then. What made you think, okay, just hang on, just hang on?
It was a combination of things. First, I had some great family support. My best friend became kind of a helpful buddy and ended up being a partner. His little sister, she's like my little sister, would come in and help work, and I didn't have to pay him. We were all just having such a good time that we were just excited to be a part of this new art form and this new growth of the business. Financially, I think that the key to surviving those first year or so was that I had negotiated no rent. If I had to pay rent or anything, or if I had to pay employees, I probably wouldn't have made it. But I was doing everything by the seat of my pants and just, encouraged people to work for me for free. And I had the rent for free and stuff. And after 6 months, it actually started making money. The press here in Sacramento, there was 2 newspapers at the time. We're down to 1. But they were excited to have something to talk about, especially the entertainment editors, because there wasn't a lot going on in Sacramento. We're not like a hub of culture, right? Mostly state workers. And all of a sudden, I'm bringing in people. Now, by the way, they weren't famous at the time. This was years before Full House. So nobody knew who Bob Saget or Dave Coulier or even Gary Shandling or Jerry Seinfeld were at the time. But it was still a novelty. Stand-up comedy was still this novelty entertainment format. And it brought joy and happiness. I mean, it's so funny. If you opened up a playhouse and you brought in plays, something a little more serious or dramatic, I don't know if it would have had that stickiness. You know what I mean? And the other thing I think that was unique for stand-up comedy, if you don't mind me extrapolating, is that every week there was a new show. So people came back week after week after week, and that's how we built an audience. And they always saw a new and interesting show. And back in the early days, you would do an opening act, a middle act, and a headliner. In the middle act, I always used a magician or a ventriloquist or some sort of, prop comic or something. And that made it interesting. And, and these are things I learned from talking to people down in LA. And then I eventually, of course, San Francisco was kind of a hub for comedy. I got in pretty tight in the San Francisco comedy community. And I was just always asking questions and learning things and then able to put them to work here in Sacramento. It was interesting and fun. I don't know. It might be a little boring for your listeners. It sounds crazy. But it was really fun at the time. One quick story. So Bob Saget and Dave Coulier were really, really good friends and helped me a bunch. In fact, my first 2 TV commercials, Bob Saget wrote them, acted in them, and never charged me a cent. And I still have copies of those commercials. On one, he's driving my car and he hits me with my own car. And the other one, he throws me off a roof of a building. So we were having a lot of fun. Bob Saget wrote these commercials and then starred in them, and that helped me get going. But it was, I don't know, maybe 6 months into the business, And Bob was scheduled to come up, and he calls me up and he goes, "Hey, Bob, Scott, I got a friend that's he's an actor in a new TV show, and he's got to do a little stand-up comedy bit in the TV show. Can he come up and practice?" And I go, "Well, yeah, Bob, anything for you, right?" So basically, Bob was bringing his own opening act for the week. And so this young guy comes up, and he doesn't know anything about stand-up comedy, but he's an actor. So Bob Saget's writing material for him, and I'm teaching him how to be a comic, like where to look and how to use the microphone, and dealing with the audience and the lights. So between me and Bob Saget, we helped him write like a 3-minute comedy set and perform it professionally. And he went back down to LA, and the TV show that he was on, and he was doing this comedy set, was called Bosom Buddies, and the actor was Tom Hanks.
Love it.
Yeah, it was. Now, of course, Tom Hanks wasn't Tom Hanks at the time. This was his very first appearance on TV, Bosom Buddies. But getting a chance to work with him and helping him develop that set. And what was great is we spent a week teaching him, and then the next week they shot it, and the week after that it appeared on TV. And it was great to see the work that we did come off on the TV show Bosom Buddies.
Man, so Scott, what's it like having that connection with these stars before they're stars? Like a Tom Hanks, we all know what he turned out to be. But to know that you had like a level of impact that early on this guy's career, it's phenomenal.
Well, it was interesting, but again, Dave, we're all so young, right? So
Right.
you don't really know what you know. It's kind of what they call imposter syndrome, where you're doing these things, you're helping people develop. Dave Coulier and Jerry Seinfeld are still building their acts and learning their trade and writing material, and you're working with these comic geniuses. But at the time, as I mentioned, I'm a business owner in a business I've never done before. And so I'm making mistakes and learning and marketing and everything. I mean, when you own a comedy club, it's not like just throwing somebody up on stage. You have to, learn how to run a bar. You have to learn how to run a restaurant, because a comedy club sells drinks and bars. You have to learn about marketing and advertising, how best to get people in without losing your ass, right? So, you're so busy living, right, that sometimes you fail to understand the impact of what you're doing. And that's why in my later years, now semi-retired, started a podcast, because I can tell these stories, relive the moments, and reconnect with all these entertainers and other people from the stand-up comedy industry. Because at the time, you're like just so busy, you don't really do, I hope that answered your question. You don't realize what you're doing at the time. Another really funny story. It was a Wednesday night. There's maybe 13, 12 people in the audience, and the headliner was Gary Shandling. Now, I think everybody knows who Gary Shandling is. He was the star of the Larry Sanders Show, the Gary Shandling Show. If you Google his name, you'll see him, and you go, "Oh, him." He was in a bunch of movies. Well, Gary was a new stand-up comic. In fact, we were the first club that he ever worked outside of his hometown of Phoenix, Arizona. And we were the first club to make him a headliner. Wow. And he's headlining over a really small Wednesday night audience, maybe 12 people or so. And about halfway through his set, one of the guys gets up from the audience and goes to the bathroom. And Gary just stops. And he goes to the other 11 people. He goes, "That's way too high a percentage. Come with me." And he took those 11 men and women into the men's room. This poor guy standing at the urinal doing his business. Gary marches right in, stands right behind him, and turns around. All 11 people cram into the men's room. And then he goes on with his comedy set like nothing had changed. Talk about the pressure on that poor guy at the urinal. It was such a funny moment. It never happened before, never happened again. But Gary Shandling took the entire audience into the restroom to do a comedy show. And for those that were concerned, yes, we made sure he washed his hands.
Oh, beauty. That guy must have had massive like stage fright. The guy at the
Yeah,
urinal.
right. Performance anxiety, it's called. Come on, come on.
Oh my God, man. I'm tearing up. Okay. So you're just dropping names here, Scott, like megastar names. Now, do you keep in touch with any of these guys now? Like you talked about your podcast. Can you let people know the name of the podcast and all that?
Yeah, so my podcast is called Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC, and that comes from that's how I was introduced every night. I was the MC of my own shows. So it would come over the loudspeaker, ladies and gentlemen, here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards. So the podcast is Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC, and I switch off every other week. One week I do a pure stand-up comedy show with sets from all these people from back in the 80s and 90s. And then the opposite or the next week, I do an interview with somebody from the industry. So I've done booking agents, managers, club owners, waitresses, but a lot of comics. And we talk about, how they got into comedy, where, how they write their material. And then I always share a little bit of their comedy. So there's a lot of stand-up comedy, a lot of great stories and information in the podcast. And it helps me reconnect with the industry. To answer your question, some of the more famous ones, I don't interact with anymore. I mean, we have to keep in mind this was like 40 years ago. And so, if I ran into them in the street, they would know who I was and vice versa. But we don't chat on a regular basis. Sadly, many of them have passed away because so much time has passed. And it was a great, great loss when we lost Bob Saget to a tragic accident just recently in the last year. And, Robin Williams, he played my club once and twice actually, but, losing people like that. Gary Shandling has gone to the Great Comedy Club in the Sky. So time makes it so that you're not able to really connect. However, I have had a chance to interview, for example, Yakov Smirnoff, who was a huge stand-up comic back in the 80s. He was actually helped write scripts for Ronald Reagan. He was on the president's staff and performed.
Get out of here. Seriously?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yakov was
Wow.
the first Russian comic to come over and play in the States. He had to get permission from Russia. It took years to come over. And when he came over, he didn't speak English. He literally learned how to speak English by watching TV. And his first clubs he worked was mine, and worked my clubs many times. Now he has his own theater in Branson, Missouri, and he went and got his doctorate. He's a psychologist now. But Yakov Smirnoff, very, very talented guy, and he still performs. But people like Sinbad, I've had some interactions with. The star of Roger Rabbit, Charles Fleischer, worked my club. Harry Anderson, he too has passed away, but a very talented comic magician. People may remember from the movie Cheers and Night Court. I'm sorry, the TV shows Cheers and Night Court. Dana Carvey pretty much got a start in my club. He was out of the Bay Area, but we were one of his first big road gigs. What's great about Dana, I have two quick stories. Do you have time? Dana Carvey,
of course.
if you guys know from Wayne's World and Saturday Night Live, was a really funny and talented guy. He does impressions and voices and very, very talented material. But a lot of people don't know he was also a very talented comic musician. In fact, Bob Saget used to do a lot of comedy music. A lot of people don't know that. But anyway, Dana was a regular at the club. And one time he brought his brother's band up, a whole band. There was like 3 pieces, 2 women doing backup singing. It was amazing. And he made it part of his act for the week he was at my club. And Dana was the front man and singing all these songs. And that was the very first time we heard the song Choppin' Broccoli, which he made famous on Saturday Night Live. If anybody Googles it, you'll hear the song and you go, oh, wow. Or go to my podcast, it's on there. And so that was fun having the whole band there with backup singers and everything, with Dana doing some songs that went on to be big hits on Saturday Night Live. And speaking of Saturday Night Live, after the shows, we were really chumming with the comics. Again, they weren't famous yet. They were just our coworkers. And Dana and I were sitting in a hot tub with a couple young ladies at the apartments that I kept the comics in. And he had just gotten off the phone with Lorne Michaels, who said, hey, can you come out to New York on Monday and try out for Saturday Night Live? And Dana was like excited and scared at the same time, right? He couldn't believe he was being asked by Lorne Michaels to come out to New York, but he was also a little intimidated because this is back in the days of, Jim Belushi and Chevy Chase, Saturday Night Live status, right? It was a huge, huge show back in the early 80s. And Dana was, I was in the hot tub with him right after he had that phone call. So that was really exciting. And my little touch of fame with Saturday Night Live, that's as close as I got.
But it's interesting how you're connected to like history in certain respects, like Dana Carvey getting that big break. You know what, Scott? Big tip of the cap to you, because you provided a platform for these guys to thrive early on. And that's all because you saw a gap in the market. You took a chance. You were bleeding money, but you knew it would work somehow, some way.
Yeah, and kind of like the idea of your podcast, it was all about having fun.
Mm-hmm.
If it had been, working a mortuary or being a insurance agent, and that was the niche or the opportunity I saw, yeah, I might have made a living, but this was fun. And so even though I struggled and I made a lot of mistakes, I was just a kid, like I said. Funny story, Dave. I was 24 and I probably looked young for my age. And one time, well, it didn't happen a couple times, but one time in particular, I was kicking this drunk guy out of the club. I was also the bouncer. When you're a club owner, you do everything, right? Clean the toilets, bouncers. Anyway, I was bouncing this guy out of the club for being drunk and interrupting the show. And he's like, well, who the hell are you? I want to talk to the manager. Well, sir, I am the manager. Well, screw you. I want to talk to the owner. I am the owner. What? Well, no, your father. Let me talk to him. No, I'm the owner. Get your ass out of here.
Gosh.
It was a really fun, interesting time. And it was the ultimate fun job.
Oh, most definitely. It sounds like it. So comedy clubs, what's the state of comedy clubs today? I don't know if I'm sure you've been to some since then, like in today's, landscape. How does one get a comedy club going today to be successful? Like isn't it a thriving industry now? Because every time I look at a TikTok, I'm seeing comedians. I love comedians. What's your take?
Well, it's interesting you say that because social media has actually hurt the industry because people are going online and doing funny things and trying to do material. And it's so funny because some of them, what's it called when they get hot and they all of a sudden they get like 1 million likes or something? They went viral, right? So some guy goes on and he tells a couple stupid jokes and it goes viral and he gets 1 million viewers. And then some agent goes, oh, let's put you on TV or let's put you in this comedy club. Right. Well, then the guy gets there. He's got no experience. He's never been in front of a live audience. And he's got literally 2 jokes, right? And they're paying him $10,000 to do a headliner set, which you got to do about an hour. And they can't do it. And the people are confused. I'm like, they're not really stand-up comics. They're just a viral flash in the pan. But those have taken people away from the industry. It's interesting that you asked about stand-up comedy as a business because when I started, like I said, 12th club in the country, about 6-8 years later, I had a really good run by myself. Stand-up comedy blew up and all the discos became comedy clubs. So instead of, there being one comedy club in Sacramento, all of a sudden there were, two or three, or in LA, instead of three, there were now 10, right? In San Francisco, there was easily 8 to 10 clubs. And so they were just exploded. And it was mostly discos that converted. As disco died, comedy kind of launched. And it was really, really hot from about 85, 86 to the early 90s. And then we had a bit of a depression or recession, 91, 92. And comedy started falling back. In fact, I sold and got out of the business in 2001. So I stayed in for 21 years. But my club is still going. And still very successful. So one of the first clubs ever in the country is now, at over 40 years, one of the oldest clubs in the country. It's in Old Sacramento here in Northern California, and still operating. However, comedy has changed, and as it should, things develop and change. Back in my day, it was an opening act, a feature act, and a headliner. They had to do so much time, and they were purposely working my club. You mentioned it a little bit, Dave. We were a stepping stone to success. So people would work in open mics, and then they would come to what's called an A room. That's what I was. And that was to get ready for the opportunity for maybe television or movies, right? It was a means to an end, right? Some of them stayed stand-up comics and made a great career out of it. But many of them got TV shows like Seinfeld, and of course Full House, and Night Court, these different things. Gary Shandling went on to be a movie actor and had his own TV shows. So the interesting part of it today is that path to television doesn't exist anymore. There's nobody in Hollywood looking to develop some stand-up comic and put a show around them, right? You're not seeing a lot of sitcoms come out these days, and they're rarely based on the talent of a comic like Seinfeld. I mean, Seinfeld worked for me very regularly until he got the Seinfeld Chronicles, which became Seinfeld. And he called me up and he goes, "Hey, Scott, I got to cancel my week. I'm going to have my own TV show." Yay. That was the whole goal. We all celebrated with him. Jerry was such a great guy that after the first year of Seinfeld, and he ended up being, he's still outperforming, multi-millionaire, successful TV star. He called me up and he goes, "Scott, you helped me out and you let me out of that week that, we had a contract. So I could do my show." So he came back and worked a whole week for the same money that I had originally booked him for, even though now he was the star of a major TV show. So a really honorable guy, very, very funny. Of course, everybody knows Jerry, how funny he is, but just incredible.
No, that's great to hear. Wow, like classy. It sounds like to me. Just seeing Jerry's career just unfold, even to this day, there's new ways he's evolving himself. I'm finding, with the coffee show on Netflix, the Comedians in Cars, and like that
I love
Netflix
that.
movie. It's just he's really, I don't know. I guess maybe he's bored, because he wants to. Let's do a movie about Pop-Tarts. You know what I mean? It's like, but
right. Well, he has the time and the money. I mean, that's the thing. And what I love about he and Jay Leno worked for me many, many times. I did, after success with the comedy clubs, I spread my wings. I produced several large concerts, a couple of them with Jay Leno, Yakov Smirnoff, Dana Carvey, Jerry Seinfeld, but Jay was my main guy. And then I went on to some other projects, but I also produced 3 TV series. And it was all taking comedy as the basis, the foundation of in the industry, and then developing it into concerts, and then developing it into television. So I was learning and growing myself, but was great. And reason I brought it up is that Jay Leno and Jerry Seinfeld, they got their start working clubs like mine back in the early 80s and late 70s, are still doing stand-up comedy today.
Mm-hmm.
They love that whole interaction with the audience. They love writing material. They love that the energy you feel from an audience in a live performance. So yeah, they've done TV and they've done movies, but it's still the comedy stage that gives them a thrill that even though they're multi-millionaires and hugely successful, they could easily just stop and not do anything. They're still out performing and touring today. And I think that's impressive. It says something about the industry.
Absolutely, just the longevity, the staying power, but as well work ethic. Jerry Seinfeld, he is like, from what I understand, he's very well known for his work ethic. He's writing all the time. He's always looking for new material. He's so dedicated to the craft that's what I
Exactly.
remember.
Oh,
And
you're stating it very well.
yeah,
You should have a podcast. You did that really well.
maybe one day, man. Like I'm
Something
able to
ultimately
string some
fun.
sentences together. Not too bad.
Well, what's great about Jerry in particular, I mean, Jay Leno writes some amazing material, but Jerry in particular was is so good at finding the funny in everyday life. One of his earliest bits he did on he crafted at my club, he did on the Carson show that helped promote him into where he was doing. You know, he's talking about simple things like going to the bank or men's pajamas, you know, like why are there cuffs on the pants or a breast pocket like you're gonna, you know, have a pen in there when you go to bed. I mean, why is there a breast pocket on men's pajamas? There always is, but why? And he would find the absurdity and the funny in everyday life and still does. And it doesn't matter whether it's flying or driving or whatever it is. He and people like him, Jay Leno and many, many others, can find the funny in things that we can all relate to. And that's the secret to stand-up comedy success is relating with the audience and talking about stuff that they know. And that's why a lot of comics talk about relationships and marriage and going in a plane or driving a car, going to work, because everybody in the audience has experienced their own version of that. And what's great is stand-up comics, whether they're famous or not so famous, can find the funny.
Exactly. And we were talking earlier about the flash in the pans, and you were saying that they're not comedians.
Well,
So
they
it's
think.
connection, but they haven't applied their trade long enough to get that, I guess, that stage presence, confidence, and material, right?
They haven't gone through the crucible of a live audience.
Mhm.
And by the way, all these people have bombed. Everybody bombs sometime. That's part of the learning, right? Failures are the stepping stones to success. So you have to fail to learn. And a lot of these people that think they're comics because they're on YouTube or on social media,
Right.
they may be the class clown or the funniest one in their family, or they can make their best friends laugh. But the true value in a stand-up comic is, can you get a room full of strangers who paid money and have a vested interest in being entertained? Can you get them on your side, tell a story that engages with them and gets everybody laughing? And when you do, the energy that is shared not only with the performer, but also with the audience, is what makes that moment special. And one of the things, and this is getting a little deep, I apologize, but is so wonderful about stand-up comedy, even more so than a play or something where you're just observing, right? In a comedy audience, the audience is all part of the moment. And the comic tells a joke a certain way, and he probably has told it 100 different ways, but he tells it a certain way for that particular audience, and they get a huge laugh, and they're all sharing in it. And it doesn't matter if you're black, white, Jewish, religion, whatever, or whatever your job is, right? The garbage man's right next to the lawyer, but they're all together in the audience having a shared experience. That's the magic that I just loved bringing to my little town of Sacramento. It sounds a little whimsical, but there were many times. I mean, I'd seen these guys act 100 times. I could almost do them. I enjoyed, as a club owner, sitting back and watching the audience, and it never failed. You would always find the one person that wasn't laughing, and then you'd watch, and then they'd break, and that was like, yeah, we got everybody, right?
Oh man, what a gig. Like,
Yeah,
stop,
I
man.
mean,
That's awesome. Like
I've been
seeing
so
that unfold.
blessed.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, like you, maybe I'm not as much a comedy nerd as you, but I am a comedy nerd. Do you mind if we dig deep a little bit? Talk about comedians, like favorites, Mount Rushmore, that kind of stuff?
Well, I do. I will, with the caveat that we have a different mindset. I'm much older, and so all the guys I love and interacted with are from the 80s and 90s and maybe into the early 2000s. You were asking me before we turned on the recording
Yeah.
about, what I thought about some of the current acts.
Mm,
I don't go to comedy clubs
mm,
really anymore. I've been in the industry for, I still produce shows. So I'm still a producer. I still MC.
mm.
I still book shows, but it's not with the new talent.
Sure.
Comedy has changed. It's different. There's less careers in stand-up comedy where people do it for 10 or 20 years, right? They'll do it for a year or 2 or 5 years and then they fade out. And so that's the only caveat, is that my people
That's
that
fair.
I'm going to talk about are from a different generation, but people you've all heard of.
Mhm.
But so ask away.
All right. Okay. So let's get to it.
I'm ready.
All right. So, okay, Richard Pryor, phenomenal. But did you have any interactions with him? What was what did his comedy mean to you? What did you find funny about him?
Well, what was great about Richard, I did get a chance to see him at the Comedy Store in Hollywood once. I was kind of a regular at the clubs, the Improv and the Comedy Store down and the Ice House down in Los Angeles, because that's how I would find talent. I would go out and scout. And I saw him once at the store, and but he was from that 70s generation, the comics that had to fight through the walls of entertainment to get noticed. And because he was coming from an ethnic angle, it was a lot about, finding the funny in being black in America. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And he was able, better than most others, to turn that into a career that, led him to movies and this and that, in a very successful life. But it started off, he was an angry black comic, and he was trying to share the angst of trying to fit into the entertainment world in that regard. And it wasn't easy. And he worked really hard at it, but he was a comic genius and could really, I mean, he could be saying some really acidic comments,
Yeah.
challenging things, challenging the audience to think about difficult things about the ethnic experience, and in kind of an angry way, but he did it in a funny way that engaged the audience. Some people, you go see stand-up comedy and you come out, you just feel like, wow, that was just great. But other comics, and he's not the only one, would challenge you, would challenge the audience to look at difficult things a different way. And so you're going to come out of that show, you laughed, you had a good time, but you're thinking a lot.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
it totally does. Do you find with comedy, yeah, in the comedy club, you can say things, but outside the comedy club, those same things said can get you in a lot more hot water. Like, right?
Well, definitely. And that's one of the real gifts of stand-up comedy that I think that the industry doesn't really get, and I know that the audience does, and that is that you can get away with saying things on a comedy stage
Mm.
for the sake of humor, for the sake of entertainment, that you could never say if you're walking through a grocery store.
Yeah.
Imagine Richard Pryor spouting out about his black experience while standing in line at the DMV. It wouldn't go over quite as much as in front of 100 people that are drinking alcohol and out to have a good time.
For sure. All right. So we talked Richard Pryor. How about, okay, we talked a little bit about Robin Williams. We all know he was a whirlwind of energy. Okay.
On
It
stage.
seemed like he just flipped it on. Is that right?
Yes, that's all on stage. I had a chance to work with him a couple times, and what was amazing about Robin and I got to see him a few times in other clubs. He was just that kinetic energy, and he had what a lot of people don't remember what a Rolodex is, but a Rolodex is a file of information, and his head was specially designed that he absorbed and saved everything that he heard, and that's why he got accused of stealing material a lot.
Mm,
It wasn't that he was stealing material, but if he heard something funny about going to a gas station by another comic, his mind would retain that, and then he'd re-say it maybe differently, but it was still in his brain, and he had a unique style. I called it a machine gun style, where not everything Robin said was funny, but he's saying so many things so fast that there were enough funny things that the audience just built and built and built in the energy, where the audience and Robin, everyone's sweaty and worked out at the end because it's hard work. He was really going at it. But what a lot of people didn't realize was the minute he was off stage, he was very reclusive and quiet, and he loved people in the industry. So in the green room, we're all sitting around and just talking like you would your best friend, but it was very quiet and it was controlled. It wasn't, the stage act was different than the person backstage. But I think we saw that in his acting as he went on and did all those amazing roles in movies, was that he could turn, as you said, turn on a character or a moment and really sell it. But behind the scenes, he was basically a shy, quiet guy. It was incredible to see that switch go on and off.
It's amazing the transformation, Scott. When you get the right red light on you, you just turn into this different person. But with Robin, it was just so opposite. You have this magnetic, like energized guy, and then all of a sudden he's just very introspective, very intelligent,
Right. And he
thoughtful.
loved just talking about comedy. He would sit in the green room with the other comics and with me and whoever was around, and he'd be talking to, oh, the audience, or wow, what a great room, or what a difficult thing, why wasn't that person doing this or that? But just like a normal, comic, we would all sit in the behind the scenes and say good things and bad things about the audience or the location or this or that.
Right.
But that's part of the industry, when it's still show business, right?
Yeah.
So when you get on stage, it's a different environment. I have a great story about that. As a person in the industry who also, I was into art. I had a couple art galleries. My mom raised me to be appreciative of art because I have no talent, so I appreciate those that do, kind of like comedy. And through a couple combinations in relationships, I was invited to Red Skelton's 100th birthday. Now, he was actually turning 97, but they were afraid he wouldn't make it to 100. And they had
So they rounded up?
Yeah, they rounded up. Had his 100th birthday. They televised it or recorded it. And a lot of people should know Red Skelton was also an artist and did the famous clown pictures and stuff. Or Red Skelton, now this is going back to the 50s and 60s, but just a world-renowned entertainer. And I got invited to his 100th birthday, and to celebrate, they had 100 clowns. Even Ronald McDonald was there. And I got a chance to get a picture with all of them. It's an incredible picture. But the story is that he was near death at the time. He had lived a long, full, successful life. And they wanted to have this big birthday bash for him. And me and 200 people are in this hall, and they have a couple entertainers, and a couple people did speeches. And then they said, ladies and gentlemen, here's Red Skelton. And they rolled out this cadaver in a wheelchair and rolled him right out into the middle. And his some family were there, and his management was there, and they're saying these amazing things about Red Skelton and talking, telling about his story and how amazing it is to be able to celebrate this special birthday with him. And he's just lying there, just sitting in his chair, looked dead. I mean, it was not a pretty sight. But here's the gift of comedy and entertainment. They said, ladies and gentlemen, Red Skelton. And they helped him up. And the minute he took that microphone, you would think he was 30 years younger. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's so great to be here. What a beautiful audience. Oh, it's so great. Let me tell you a couple. And he told a couple stories and he told a couple jokes and he went on for about 5 or 6 minutes. And ladies and gentlemen, you guys are so special to be here. And as everybody knows, this is how he ended all of his shows. And God bless. And he let go of the mic and he dropped back into the chair like he had died. And what was so impressive to me was it was a great example of how the energy and the power of entertainment and what you get from an audience that you, I mean, as soon as he touched that mic, he was alive, right? I mean, that interaction with the audience, that need to perform, that anxiousness to engage with an audience. It was an amazing, beautiful sight to see.
My goodness, it's just the joy of laughter. Like I can imagine if you're a performer, you're a comedian, you're seeing that kind of reaction in real time, Scott. Just people loving what you're saying. It's got to lift up your heart, man. Like afterwards, you got to feel like $1,000,000.
Oh, Red Skelton was just such a gift to the world. He was such a good comic and actor and television. I mean, people that are older, anybody over 50 knows about his amazing career. But that was the epitome of an example of what being in entertainment's all about. And it meant something to everybody in the room. When he said, God bless, you took it to heart. And it was very, very special. But, you know, I have been lucky to have many unique experiences. In fact, let me share this. I told you I used to go to the Comedy Store a lot and check out acts. And I was at the Comedy Store and I was in a booth right by the stage. And I'm, you know, me and one of my partners and a couple of young ladies. And Gary Shandling is on stage. Now, Gary had been working for me for years. I knew his act backwards and forwards. And I'm the bad guy in the story, by the way. I'm the bad guy. I'm BSing, trying to, you know, entertain the girls in the booth, right? We're drinking, we're talking, we're laughing, and apparently I got a little loud. And all of a sudden I hear this, shh, right? And I'm like, am I getting shushed? Shh. And I look out, and in the next booth over, leaning out, shushing me was Joan Rivers.
Oh, man.
She was basically saying, shut up and listen to Gary. It was so, and I, you know, felt bad. And I got real quiet and mousy. It was my bad. I was trying to get laid, not listening to my buddy Gary doing material for the 100th time. But to have Joan Rivers shush you, that kind of wakes you up.
Oh my gosh. The people you've come in contact with, Scott, unbelievable, man. Awesome. All right, sir. You know what? You've given us a great amount of time here. And, it was just great, amazing stories. Where can people find out more about you? You got a podcast. What else are you up to? Let the people know.
Uh, may I add one quick thing?
Yeah.
We talked about it before, but you didn't. I didn't get to it. You wanted to ask my favorite comic, and
Yes.
I want to say that I've worked with all the best, and there's no way you could pick the best because they're all good in their own right. That's what's great about stand-up comics. They're all individual. You know, both Jay Leno and Jerry Seinfeld do really good. Culturally relevant material, but they're still approaching from a totally different way. But I want everyone to go to the Googler and look up Larry Miller. All right, Larry Miller. He's not only been in hundreds of movies. As soon as you see him, you'll recognize him from all those movies. Lots of TV. But what a lot of people don't know, he was one of the funniest stand-up comics ever and could tell a story better than anybody. So I just wanted to get that out there. Go check out Larry Miller, see who I'm talking about, and then look for his work because one of the best ever. even though I've worked with everybody from Soupy Sales to Pat Paulson to Robin and Jay Leno and Dana Carvey and Seinfeld, you name it, incredible. All right, so I have my main podcast, Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC, where you can get interviews and comedy, full comedy sets, and that releases every Sunday. It's a lot of fun. It gets about 2,000 or 3,000 downloads a week, so it's very popular around the world. But that's a long format. It's about anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour in each show. And I realize a lot of people like comedy and short bits, and so I have another podcast called Comedy Appeteasers. Comedy Appeteasers is a short form stand-up comedy show. All the shows are between 4 and 7 minutes, and it's just straight stand-up comedy. I'll introduce a comic. You'll hear some material. It releases every Friday to start your weekend. Whoop, whoop. And so Comedy Appeteasers. So those are the two comedy-based podcasts. Now, one other quick thing, Dave, if I could share. It's the ultimate fun job is to have a network. So I have the Stand-Up Comedy Podcast Network. Everybody go to your Apple phone or your Android phone. It's a free app, the Stand-Up Comedy Podcast Network. And on there, I've got videos of all these famous guys. I've got my podcast. I've got stories. I've got blogs. I've got how to be a stand-up comic course, all on the Stand-Up Comedy Podcast Network, a free app on your phone, or go to standupcomedypodcastnetwork.com and you'll find the website. How about that for a plug? Woo-hoo!
Fantastic.
Oh, wait.
Scott, man, what a time to be alive. Like, think about it. Years ago, you had all these experiences, and now today you could create content to repurpose all those experiences, tell your stories.
Aren't we blessed with that? There was no internet when I was young, and there was it really was, stage to TV to maybe movies. Now people can entertain through social media, through YouTube. I have a YouTube channel. It's under Scott Edwards. Do look for that. A lot of videos there. It really, I'm blessed because I had this amazing life where I've had all these crazy experiences. And now through the podcast and through my YouTube channel, I can reconnect with those people in the industry. And then, as you just said, share those stories, and I get to relive them. I mean, it's a joy for me. I had a blast when I was young, and now I get to reshare it and relive those experiences. And by the way, thank you for your opportunity for allowing me to do this. I was talking to you earlier. You had Joe from TikTok, and you had Brett from the movie trailers, and you had Andrew, the anthropologist. I mean, you have all these eclectic guests. Somehow I fit in there, but I was so blessed to be on here. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope your audience had fun and learned something.
I'm sure they did. Scott, this has been amazing. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, for the laughs and the great stories. Man, this guy has worked with like giants in the world of comedy, and it was just so cool to find out the behind the scenes and like his connections with those people. So Scott, thank you again. All right, if you enjoyed this interview, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and podcast. Until next time, take care and have a good one.